Here's the object we're going to be making. Let's fold it out here. See, it's 60 stitches wide. It's got kind of this seed stitch running across the bottom and up the side and across the top, and this waveform pattern going across the middle. The yarn we're working with is 12 wraps per inch pure cotton, and the needles are going to be 3.5 millimeter DPNs. That's US number 4s. Now, DPNs aren't optimal for this project, but they'll get the job done. We're going to start by weighing out our product here. The supplier claims that this is 50 grams at 125 meters, so let's just verify that. And lo and behold, it's 2 grams short. That's not really a surprise. Most suppliers do skimp on the weight in order to make more money. But moving on from there, let's start by casting on 60 stitches, which is pretty much where you're going to max out the 8-inch DPNs when using this yarn weight and gauge. So we're going to start by sectioning off a bit of our tail, so that's 8 inches, 16, and we're going to just grab way more than we need and then see how much we actually needed afterwards. So that's 40 inches, let's go 48, be safe. That's approximately 120 centis, little more just to be safe. So we're just going to make a standard slip knot. Make sure to pull your slip knot from the working yarn, this top one here, the one leading off to the yarn ball. Pull it through the loop like so and tighten it off, so that when you pull on the working yarn and not the tail end, you'll tighten the loop, as you can see here. So we're going to use a long tail cast on method. It's a pretty standard method. Goes like this. And if you're not familiar with this, I do have a video prepared explaining the specifics of the technique, and you can click on that video right up there in the top left. And just cast on 60 stitches total. And you can see this cotton yarn is kind of these loose strands spun together, unlike a wool yarn, which is kind of felted a bit more. The cotton yarn is very eager to split off, so bear that in mind while you're working here. So go ahead and count off your stitches and make sure you have 60 in total. It's better to count one more time just to be sure, you know. And that's 60, so I got one too many. So drop that off, and now we're ready to begin here. Notice now that the needle is very overpopulated with stitches, so there's a good chance of dropping your back stitch off the back of the needle. So keep that in mind while you're working. Try to keep your yarn compressed towards the center of the needle. So we can see here that's 8 inches, 16 inches, about 24 inches of excess tail. So we could have gotten away with like 32 inches or, 80 centimeters. But let's begin our first row. Let's get into position with the working yarn, not the tail end. That's very important. And we're going to slip the first stitch purlwise. See that symbol top left? That will bring you to more information about the slip stitch. And then we're going to knit one symbol in the top center. That's a tutorial link to the knit stitch. And then we're going to purl one stitch. Again, top right. If you click that, it'll bring you to a purl tutorial. And then we're just going to repeat that. We're going to knit one. First row is always the most difficult, remember that. And then purl one. It's a little too tight. I should really learn to cast on a little looser. It's hard to get a uniform then, but then knit one, purl one, repeat the entire row. So if you clicked on those tutorial links, those symbols, and nothing happened, it's probably because you have annotations turned off, and I feel you, those things can be real annoying. So if they're not working, the tutorial links are also available down in the description. But yeah, just keep knitting one and then purling one, and just repeat that all the way to the end of the row. So we're closing in on the end of the row. The work should look something like this, but bear in mind that stitches can fall off the back, so keep it compressed like that. So we have a few stitches left here. Where are we at? We're on a purl, and then a knit, then purl and knit. And like the first row is kind of extra tight, so it's going to take a little more time, but don't be discouraged. It will get a lot easier the further you get into the work. And this yarn, this cotton yarn, is quite susceptible to splitting, so just be patient. and always purl the last stitch, regardless. Okay, so that's our first row completed, and yeah, it's looking pretty decent. Let's compress it, turn it around, get back into position, and begin row 2. So you want your working yarn coming around the bottom of the needle like so. That's very important, or else you're going to get a double stitch and it's going to increase your count and mess things up for you. But you see here, that is a knit stitch right there. The next one's a purl. So we're going to do the opposite of that on this round to create the seed edge. So we're going to, instead of knitting this, we're going to purl it. So it's the opposite now. We're going to purl one, and on last round we purled the second stitch. We're going to knit that one, and that's going to be our repeat. So slip the first one, purl one, knit one, and then purl one, knit one, all the way to the end of the round, or row rather. So we're closing in on the end of the row here. Just purl one and knit one, and always purl the last stitch. And you might be noticing already that it's becoming a little easier to work the stitches, just because that tension is kind of loosening up a little bit. Okay, so again, remember to keep your yarn from slipping off the back of the needle. You know, that's the danger here. So keep it compressed like this. And let's begin round 3, which is the same as round 1. We're just going to slip the first one. You see that's a purl there. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to knit one. That's a knit stitch. You see it goes behind the loop there. So we're just going to purl that stitch. And then we're going to repeat that all the way to the end. Just knit one and purl one. And try to keep your tension nice and even and relatively tight. Okay, so we're closing in on the end here. Just going to purl and knit and purl and knit. And if you ever get confused about where you're at, just look at the last stitch. And if it's a knit, you purl it. If it's a purl, you knit it. And always purl the last stitch. Okay, that's round 3 completed. Keep the work compressed on the needle. And let's do the last round of the seated edge, round number 4. It's the same as round 2. And we slip the first one purlwise, then we purl. Yes, purl, and then we knit, and then we purl, and then we knit, as we have been doing with the seated edge so far. And we just continue that all the way to the end. So now we're about to start the more interesting bit, where we're actually creating this wave type pattern. But we're still going to maintain a seated edge across the first 4, or I would say 5, including the slip stitch, 5 stitches. So we're going to start by slipping the first stitch purlwise. So we're going to maintain our seed stitch over these 4 stitches here. So that's a purl, that first one there. So we'll knit that, and then purl the next, and then alternate knit purl. So just look at the first stitch and then determine whether or not it's going to be a knit or a purl, right? That's the best way to keep track. Now we can start our actual pattern. So it calls for a knit 3, and then a purl 1, and then a knit 2, and then a purl 1. And then it again calls for a knit 3. So that's one iteration completed. So we can start again here. Knit 3. And then that will be a purl. But you can see here, so we knit 3 after our seed edge, purled 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 3, and then knit 3 again. So that's 6 knits in a row, because we ended the pattern and then started a new one. Then we purl 1, knit, knit, and purl. And then knit 3, and that concludes another iteration. And then we can start the next one by knitting 3, so it's essentially 6 in a row, purl, knit 2, purl, 6 in a row, all the way till you get to the last 4 stitches, or 5 including, yeah, that slipped edge. So yeah, the way I think about it is I just keep knitting 6, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, and then knit 6, and until you get to the last 5 stitches. We're there now. So you see, now we want to continue our seed, right? So let's explain this in a good way. So when you come up to the last 5 stitches, you look at this first one, you see that's a purl right there, and that's a knit. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to knit that first one, purl the second one, and then repeat, knit, purl, and always purl the last one. So the best way to determine what to do on the seated edge is simply just read the last round and do the opposite. That's my advice. That's how I handle that situation. So that's our first row completed. And we'll turn it around and begin the second row of the pattern, which is actually row 6. But yeah, here we go. So take a look here. You see that's a knit, so we'll purl it. Next one here, that's a purl, so we'll knit it. And then we purl and knit. And that's the end of our seated edge. So now we can get it on with our waveform pattern here. So we're on the back of the work now, which means everything has to be backwards. So when it calls for purl, you knit. If it calls for a knit, you purl. So we knit 1 and we purl 3, as per se in the pattern here. And then we knit 2. Those 2 purls there, but they're on the back. So, and then we purl 3. And then we end the iteration by knitting 1. Right here. And then we start the next iteration immediately by knitting 1, and then we purl 3. So essentially what's happening is you purl 3 and then you knit 2 all the way to the end. Right, so check it. We're almost at the end here. So we've knit these 2 and we purl those 3, right? So now we're gonna purl 3 more, knit 2. 2 and 3, and then knit 2 stitches. And then we're going to purl another 3 and knit 1, but we don't have enough stitches here. So I've done something wrong and I don't know what it is. So let me just have a look here, see if I've dropped something along the way. So if we look back here, we can see that's the seated edge 5 there, and then there's 1 knit, and then 3 purls, and then 2 knits. That's what we want. And then 2 knits, 3 purls, 2 knits, 3 purls, 2 knits, 3 purls, 2 knits, 3 purls, 2 knits, so on. Yes, this all looks correct. 3, 2, 3, 2. So that's correct. What's happened? I don't see anything dropped in the work, so let's just, I guess, purl these 3 and see what happens. Yeah, there's definitely not enough there. So, oh, there it is. See, I told you. There's always a danger of slipping that. I should take my own advice, man. You need to compress the work. Anyway, so I think I can fix this pretty easily. So we knit that one, and then we do our seated edge. So see, that's purl, there's a knit, purl, and a knit. So I'm pretty sure the stitch just dropped off without unraveling. So if I can pick up all the strands, I should be able to just purl it. It appears, no. See, I don't think I need to add that on there. I think that would be a mistake. Just gotta make sure. Yeah, I think we're good. So we can just purl this last stitch. Okay, crisis averted, and we can move on. Compress. Very important. So we're going to start by slipping the first stitch purlwise, and we're going to look and see that that's a purl, that next one, right? So we knit it. And then because we knit this one, we're going to purl the next one, right? And then repeat, we knit and purl, and that makes up our seed edge. So on the beginning of last round on the wrong side, we started with a knit. But because we were looking at it from the other side, it's a purl now. So you see that first purl? That was the first, or the last stitch of the last round, or the first one of the iteration. But here we start the iteration with a knit, and then a purl, and then we're going to knit 6. And now we're crossing over the peak of the last wave. Well, so to speak. It'll make more sense further on, but yeah. Passing over that peak with those 6 stitches, then we're going to purl 1, and then we're going to knit 1. And that's the end of that iteration of the pattern. We start again, we knit, purl, and then we knit 6. So essentially what's happening is like we're knitting these 6, and then we're purling 1, and then we're knitting 2, and then we're purling 1, and then we're knitting 6. And keep doing that until you hit the last 5 stitches of the row. So purl and knit 6, and then yeah, so on. So we're closing in on the end here, so we're gonna knit 1, 2, 3, and then we want to end on a purl and then a knit, and then do the seed edge, right? So that's 1, 2, 5, and those 2, right? So that's where the purl lands, and then we knit 1, and then we knit, purl, in accordance to the seed edge. You know, just read the work. That's the best way to determine what to do. Then purl, and then always purl the last one to make the edge. Okay, so we can turn it around and start the next row. It's on the back of the work, bear that in mind. So we're reading the pattern from right to left, and a knit is a purl and a purl is a knit. So determine where you're at in the seed. Purl the first one, knit the second, purl, and knit. That concludes the seed edge, right? So we're pushing the wave forward here. So we had it on the second stitch of the pattern iteration. It is that weird like purl, the ridge kind of. I don't know how to explain it, but like here it's a knit on this side. So we're gonna purl 2 and knit the third one. That's what's important. Purl 2, then knit the third one, and then we're gonna purl until we meet the next point where that wave is coming up, which it happens to be 4 here, or it is 4, and then knit the next one, and now purl another 4. Now we're in the valley of the wave, right? Purl 4, and then knit 1, and now we're under the peak that is going to come in the next few rows, right? So we purl 4. So you can think of this as a purl 4, knit 1, right? That's sort of how it adds up in the physical. You know, we started with 2 purls and then a knit, and then 4 purls, then a knit, and then 2 purls. But when you stack them side by side, it becomes 4 purls and a knit, 4 purls and a knit. And then we end up here with this knit and then 2 purls. And then we have 5 left for our seed edge, right? So it's a sort of a displacement that adds up to a different type of pattern. So you can see it in different perspectives and different lights, right? So you see this first seed stitch is a purl, then a knit, and then a purl and a knit, and then we end on a purl. And that really concludes the extent of the pattern. Like, that is essentially all the information you need. So let's have a look at the front, right? So let's get a good view of it here. So you see this wave coming up here, and then another one starting above it, right? So if we go back and repeat that first row, like I'm gonna walk you through it right now, But like this is essentially the same as row number 5. The first one where we started the waveform is where we're at again. So we do the seed stitch, border. Now look, that's where the waveform comes up. That's where it's going to meet, right over these stitches here. So we need to push that wave forward. So we're going to knit 3. And you see that purl right there, that's where the waveform was last round, and we're going to move it 1 to the left, right? Place it right here. And then knit 2 over. And then we're moving the other side of the wave to the right. So you see that's the purl right there that I'm knitting. And then we continue knitting all the way over to the next ascent of the wave, which is coming up 6 knits from the last purl. And there it is, purl. Then we knit 2. Now I'm confusing myself. It's not purl 2, it's then, yeah, now we knit 2, and then we place the next purl. Because we're not quite there. I was like thinking 1 row ahead in my mind where the waves met, but like we're not quite there yet. But essentially what we're doing is, you see where the wave comes up, we purl, and then we knit 2, and then we purl again, and then we knit 6. And then we purl, knit 2, purl, knit 6. Purl, knit 2, purl, knit 6. And all the way over until you have 5 remaining stitches. And you're going to end on a purl and then 3 knits. This is exactly the same as row number 5. So here we are closing in on the end of the row. And we knit 1. You see that purl? So we purl this next one because we're ascending that side of the wave to create the peak. And then we knit 1, 2, 3, and we're at our seed right here. So you see that first one's a purl, so we'll knit it, and purl, and knit, and purl, and then purl the last one as well. So now we can turn it around, and this is pretty much the second iteration of the total pattern, right? So we've already done this, all right? But I'm going to show you again, exactly what you're trying to do here is you have this 4-row repeat that you just stack on top of itself again and again to create the waveform. That's what's going on. Okay, so we get through our seed. Make sure we don't split the yarn. This one's a little messed up here. I don't know what I was doing here. See if I can get it back on track. Yeah, that looks better. So that's our seated edge, right? And here we are on the back of the work. So knits are purls and purls are knits. So we're starting the new wave with that knit right there. That's a purl on the front. And then we purl 3. See right here, that's a knit. That's where the waveform is coming up. So we move it 1 to the left. And then knit 1, and then knit 1 more. Now the wave's met. Then we purl 1, 2, 3. Right? And then we're in the middle of the valley, and we start the next wave. We knit 2. Then we purl 3, and we knit 2. We purl 3, and we knit 2. That's essentially what's happening. So we're capping the last wave, and we're beginning the next wave. And we're spacing them out by 3. So you see here, those are 3 purls. So we do 2 knits. And then we purl 1, 2, 3. And we end on 1 knit right there, because that's the beginning of the wave as well. And then we do our seated edge. See, that's a purl, that's a knit. So opposite, purl and knit, and purl and knit, and then purl the last stitch. Just like so. So that's round 2 of the iteration in the greater scheme, right? So here we go, and now we've started our new wave, right? And we've capped the last wave. So now we need to move the wave forward into the next peak, right? So we do our seed stitch. There we go. Those 5 there with the slip stitch. So you see this first purl right here? You just move that one to the left like that. So you knit the first one, purl 1, and then knit 6, and then purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 6, and so on, right? So we've been through this now. We've been through the pattern twice, essentially, because it's these 4 rows. They get stacked on top of each other again and again and again to create these ascending and descending waveforms that kind of squiggle across the dishcloth. And we have our seed edge, right? So maintain the seed edge and repeat those 4 rows again and again and again for as long as you feel necessary, or for as long as the yarn is able to provide, runway. Because eventually you're going to run out of yarn. That's just how it is. And you want to make sure that you're done before the yarn is, right? You don't want to run out before you're finished with the project. So let's check in here. We're at 10 centimeters. We've done the seed edge and then iterated through the pattern roughly 8 times, a little bit more. But if we weigh our yarn, make sure you weigh all of it, right? To get as accurate a reading as you can. So it's 35, let's say 36, right? It's around 36. And we started with 48 minus 36 is 12. So 12 grams is equal to 10 centimeters of pattern. So what that's telling us is at 48 grams, at a 60 stitch cast on, we can get 40 centimeters of work. Theoretically anyway. But I'll walk you through this one more time. So do your seed stitch border, and we're at the round right after we capped the last wave and started the next one. So you see here, that purl right there, that's the beginning of the new wave. So we knit that and then we purl 1. So knit 1, purl 1, and then knit 6 to cross over the last wave peak, right? So you knit those 6, right? And then you purl 1. And if you look at the work after you've purled that 1 right here, you see 2 purls, right? That's the beginning of this wave we're working right now. So you knit those 2 purls, and then you purl 1 more. And then you knit 6 to cross over the last wave peak. And you keep doing that till you get to the end, right? So here we have the seed stitch border again. We'll look at that. That's a knit. And then this is a purl. And then knit, purl. And then we slip the next one. And we're on the back of the work now. So we just do our seed stitch border, opposite of whatever was on the last round. So purl and knit. Purl and knit. And now, because, we're on the back, everything's backwards, as in, these purls will show up as knits on the front, right? So we purl 2, knit 1, and then we purl 4, right? And you'll see right here, that's a knit. So we're moving that wave forward, right? And then we purl 4 again. So essentially what you're going to do here is you're going to purl 2, knit 1, and then purl 4, knit 1, purl 4, knit 1, purl 4, knit 1, until 5 stitches remain for your seed edge, right? There's our 5. See, the first one's a knit, so we'll purl it, and then knit, and then purl, and then knit, and then purl the last one, slip the first one. We're on the front again. See, that's a purl, so we'll knit that, and then we'll purl the next, and then we'll knit and purl. That will make up our seed edge once again. And now we're going to push that wave even farther to the right, right? So we knit 1, 2, and there's that purl, that's the wave, right? Knit that one, and then purl the next one. And then we have these 2 knits and then another purl right after that. So we're pretty close to closing the wave again. So purl that, and now knit 6. And then purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 6, all the way till you have 5 left for your ending seed edge, right? And there it is. So that's a knit. Next one's a purl, knit, purl, and then purl the last one as well. So when you start breaking things down to their simplest forms, it becomes a lot more manageable than trying to, wrap your head around this huge pattern. It's actually very simple if you break it down. I hope this is making sense. So here we are, we're going to cap the wave, right? And start the next wave. So we're going to cap the current wave and start the next wave. Do our seed stitch, we knit one right here. That's the beginning of the next wave, right? At the far left of the front of the work. And then we do 3, and then we purl 3, and then we knit 2. We purl 3, we knit 2. So everything has this sort of repeating structure. And if you can see it as such, it becomes much more manageable than just a sea of random events. It's all right there if you look. If you can look and see it, it takes practice. I don't expect this to magically happen for anybody. But if you practice and you look at a lot of knitting and do a lot of knitting, it'll start speaking to you. And I don't mean it's going to say words to you, but if you can look at it, you can read it like a book. You can read knitting like a pattern, right? Like right now, I don't have a pattern in front of me. I just have the work, and the work tells me what to do. God, I sound pretty pretentious, don't I? But anyway, here we are. We've capped this last wave, and we started a new one. So that is going to become the next waveform, right? So when you cap a wave, you start a new wave, and then you make that wave, and you cap that wave, you start a new wave, until you get to around here. We're at 33 centimeters. Just about, yeah. We're going to call this 33 centimeters. So let's see how much we have left. 5 grams. That's a little less than 5 centimeters. So we could do this waveform again. You see, I've just capped off this wave, but I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to start by knitting and purling. So slip the first one, knit, purl, or wherever you are in the seed stitch, and just run that seed stitch all the way across. So here, I'll knit and purl, and knit and purl. So normally you just do 4 and then start the pattern, but instead you're just going to run right across with the same repeat, just like we did in the beginning of the work. Because now we're gonna close it off. And the way I'm doing it now, it's not exactly symmetrical, like as in the repetition. It doesn't end on the same row as I started the waveform on, but that doesn't matter. Just get that into your mind right now. The little things don't matter. You can get away with a little bit here and a little bit there. So again, now we're on the back. We're going to do the seed straight across. So purl, knit, just the opposite of whatever you're seeing on the last row is what you're doing. That's how the seed stitch works, right? So that's a purl, I knit it. That's a knit, I purl it. Just run right across, and always purl the last stitch to make that nice, like kind of, I don't know, kind of a loose edge, slip stitch edge, I suppose you'd call it. Turn around and do it one more time, and then turn and do it one more time, and then that will be 4 rows of seed stitch, and that's what we want. So again, see, that's a purl, so I knit it, and then I purl the next, and then I knit and I purl and I knit and I purl all the way across here, and purl and knit and purl, and always, and I'm repeating myself, but that's what knitting is, repetition. And then we turn around and we're going to do our last row of seed stitch here. We're going to slip the first one purlwise like so, and then we look, that's a knit, so we purl it, and because we purled that, the next one is a knit, and then we purl and knit. And then we continue on with the purl and knit all the way to the end. So knit this one and then purl that last one, regardless. Okay, so we're good. Now we're ready to bind off. Okay, so essentially, like, how do you do that? That's the question, right? How do you uncast on, more or less? So what you do is you knit 2 and 2 together. straight across. Essentially, yeah. You knit two and two together until 0 remain. But, I mean, enough talk. Let me just show you. So you place your needle knitwise from left to right through to the back through both 2 loops, right? 2 stitches, like that. And then you pull that yarn back through both of them, right? So you've knit 2 together. And then you place that new loop back on the left needle, like so. Not that way, but with the proper orientation like that. And then you put the needle through both of them, knit those 2 together. You got a new loop, place that loop back on, and make sure that loop is pretty slack. Like, you want more slack than you think you need, essentially, right? So just pull that off, place it back on in the proper orientation, leave tons of slack, and knit both together. And just keep on doing that. So placing it back on, placing the right needle through both, pulling the yarn back through, place it back on, proper orientation, put your needle through both loops, pluck the working yarn back through to the front, and then again, and we're almost done here. So just make sure you give it a nice amount of slack. That's for everything apart from the last one. That one should be pretty tight. So this is how you finish off. You do the same thing again and pull the yarn through like that, right? And then you drop it, and then you try to tighten that stitch a lot and kind of see how it's kind of loose, and we don't really like that. So how are we going to fix that, so to speak? So you break the yarn or cut it, whichever you prefer. Cotton's a little tougher than wool, so you might just want to cut it. And what you want to do now is, see this last loop we have here that we just made from those 2 stitches? We want to pluck the yarn through that again, right? And pull it all the way through. And then place that loop down over those last 2 loops, kind of. And just pull it tight. And what that's going to do is make a little tightening knot that kind of holds those last 2 stitches in place. Like, this isn't essential. You can just pull the yarn through the last loop and tighten it, but doing this will kind of, make it a little more presentable at least. But that's it. We're done. This is what the work looks like now. Like, obviously you want to sew in the loose ends, but that part really sucks, so let's not focus on that right now. Just marvel at what you've done. It's dishcloth. Good job.